The purpose of the air conditioning system is to decrease the temperature of the bleed air and to distribute the air to the cockpit and cabin. The system has two packs that are the primary source of conditioned air and pressurization for the cockpit and passenger cabin. The two packs are the same, and one pack can supply a sufficient quantity of conditioned air and pressure for all operations. The controls and indications for the air conditioning packs are on the forward overhead panel on the air conditioning bleed air controls panel, and the cabin temperature controls panel. The packs decrease the temperature of the warm air from the bleed air system with a sequence of heat exchangers and an air cycle machine. The air cycle machine continues to decrease the air temperature before the air goes into the mixing chamber. The heat exchangers use external airflow to decrease the temperature of the warm bleed air. The ram air doors control the flow of external air to the heat exchangers. The ram air doors are fully open while on the ground and during slow flight with the flaps extended, and move as necessary between full open and full closed in cruise flight. When the ram air door is full open, the related ram door full open light illuminates on the air conditioning bleed air controls panel. The temperature controller adjusts the temperature of the air which goes out of the pack. Each pack has two air mix valves. One valve controls the amount of air that goes through the heat exchangers and the air cycle machine. The other air mix valve controls the amount of air that goes directly to the mixing chamber. The temperature controllers change the positions of the two air mix valves to get the necessary temperature from the related pack. The air mix valve indicator on the cabin temperature control panel shows the output temperature of the related pack. If the temperature controller does not operate, you can control the pack output temperature directly with the related temperature selector set to manual. To control the bleed air that enters the pack, you use the air conditioning pack switches on the air conditioning bleed air controls panel. The air conditioning pack switch controls the related pack valve. Now turn off the pack. When you set the pack switch to off, the pack valve closes fully and bleed air does not go into the air conditioning pack. Now set the pack switch to high. When you set the pack switch to high, the packs supply the maximum airflow. Now set the pack switch to auto. When you set the pack switch to auto, the pack adjusts to high flow or low flow to keep sufficient pressurization and conditioned air in the cabin. The air conditioning system supplies the conditioned air from the packs to the cockpit and passenger cabin. The left pack supplies conditioned air directly to the cockpit. The system mixes the remaining air from the left pack and the air from the right pack in the mix manifold. From the mix manifold, the system supplies the air to the passenger cabin in the left sidewall riser and the right sidewall riser. If you use a ground preconditioned air source, the air goes directly into the mix manifold. Air from the passenger cabin moves to the forward cargo bay, where the recirculation fan collects the air and sends it to the mix manifold. The recirculation system decreases engine bleed air demand and total load on the air conditioning packs. The recirculation fan switch is on the air conditioning bleed air controls panel. In the off position, the recirculation fan does not operate. You normally set the recirculation fan switch to auto during the pre-flight. Set auto now. When the switch is in auto, the recirculation fan operates unless the two packs operate. And one pack switch is in high. You control the temperature in two areas, the cockpit and the passenger cabin, with the temperature selectors. The cockpit temperature selector controls the output temperature of the left pack and the temperature of the cockpit. The passenger cabin temperature selector controls the output temperature of the right pack and the temperature of the passenger cabin. When the temperature selectors are in the auto range, the automatic temperature controller adjusts the air mix valves in the related pack to supply the set temperature. Now set a cooler temperature for the cockpit. The temperature controller adjusts the output temperature of the left pack to lower the temperature of the cockpit. Now set the selector to manual. When the selector is in manual, you directly control the air mix valves in the related pack. You must move and hold the selector to the necessary position to move the air mix valves. Now set the cockpit temperature selector to the auto range. The temperature indicator shows the temperature of either the left sidewall riser or the passenger cabin. With the air temperature source selector, you can select the supply duct or the passenger cabin. Select passenger cabin now. The temperature indicator now shows the temperature in the passenger cabin. The equipment cooling system keeps the temperature of the cockpit instruments and the electronic equipment in the E&E bay at less than the operating limits. The system has a normal supply fan and a normal exhaust fan. Also, there is an alternate supply fan and there is an alternate exhaust fan. The supply fan collects cool air from the passenger cabin and supplies it to the cockpit displays and electronic equipment in the E&E bay. The exhaust fan collects warm air from the cockpit displays, the circuit breaker panels, and the electronic equipment in the E&E bay. On the ground and in flight, with a low differential pressure, the overboard exhaust valve is open and the system discards the warm air overboard. In flight, at a higher differential pressure, the overboard exhaust valve normally closes and the system supplies the warm air to the lining of the forward cargo bay. The controls for the equipment cooling system are on the forward overhead panel. The supply switch operates the normal or alternate supply fan. The exhaust switch operates the normal or alternate exhaust fan. There are low airflow detectors in both the supply duct and exhaust duct. If the selected fan does not operate and the airflow stops, the related off light illuminates. When the off light illuminates, you select the related alternate fan. The off light extinguishes after the air starts to flow again. The alternate fan supplies the same quantity of airflow as the normal fan. We will now look at some non-normal conditions related to the air conditioning system. If the temperature in the ducts to the cockpit or passenger cabin is greater than limits, the related duct overheat light illuminates on the cabin temperature controls panel. When the duct overheat light illuminates, the air mix valves in the related pack move to full cold. To decrease the output temperature of the related pack, select a colder temperature with the related temperature selector. To let the air mix valves operate as usual, push the trip reset switch on the air conditioning bleed air controls panel. If the duct temperature increases quickly, or if the air mix valves move to full hot, the temperature controller does not operate correctly. When you see this condition, select Manual on the related temperature selector. Because the temperature controller does not operate, you must manually adjust the air mix valves as necessary. If the temperature inside the ducts to the cockpit or the passenger cabin are greater than a higher limit, or if the air temperature inside a pack is greater than limits, the related pack trip-off light illuminates on the air conditioning bleed air controls panel. When the pack trip-off light illuminates, the air mix valves move to full cold and the pack valve closes. To reduce the load in the pack, select a hotter temperature with the related temperature selector now. To open the related pack valve and to let the air mix valves operate as usual, press the trip reset switch. If the temperatures stay less than the limits, the air conditioning pack operates as usual.